On behalf of Sriaurobindo Integral Life Center, Auro University, and on behalf of AuroBharati Pondicherry, I welcome all of you to this discourse, which is based on art and spirituality, Kala Evam Adhyatma. We are continuing with the series. In the previous session, Beloo ji had taken to the journey what Sriaurobindo talks in Renaissance, the book on Renaissance. Today again, I invite Beloo ji to continue with the same line, and thereafter we will have 15-minute discussion. If you have any question or any comment, you can put it in question and answer box. Otherwise, you can directly participate even in between while raising the hand, because you are entered as participant also. Or at the end, we will have 15 minutes. There also you can talk. Thank you. Over to you, Beloo ji.
Thank you, Kiran ji, and namaste everyone who has joined and also who will be joining in the next few minutes. Last time we had kind of like, I did a little quick overview of few key points from Sriaurobindo's various writings on Indian art, which have a focus on spirituality as the foundation of Indian art and aesthetic, the aesthetic side of Indian culture. So this time I thought I will go a little bit deeper into some of his key essays, starting with, he has actually several essays on Indian art, but in this book, which I'm going to just show here, and these are also available as full PDFs. This is the in his complete works, it's volume number 20. It's titled The Renaissance in India and Other Essays on Indian Culture. There are 4 essays, simply titled Indian Art 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first essay is a general one, which I will try to go into a little bit today, because there he brings up some very important points of how the connoisseurs, the rasics, should be looking at art, whether it is Indian art, and he also gives example of European, Western art, and sort of like gives us a very good, what he calls as the first principles to understand any artistic aesthetic tradition. And with the very interesting examples, he explains that. So I would like to go a little bit deeper into it today and maybe the next week, and then we will do some other different things. But before I get into that, last time I didn't get a chance to speak what Kiran ji also wanted me to share, just a few quickly about what Renaissance AuroBharati is. So AuroBharati is a vertical of Aurobindo Society that focuses on Indian culture, studies and research and various educational activities related to all aspects of Indian culture, with this, in the light of Aurobindo and the mother's vision for the future of India and India's role for world and humanity. So we are not only looking at what was glorious about the past of Indian culture, but also what it means for the future direction of India. And I had one particular division of AuroBharati, which is the monthly journal, which is our main dissemination instrument, you can call it. It's a monthly online journal that is called Renaissance, taken from this very book, the title, The Renaissance in India, The Rebirth of India. So the focus of this journal is on 2 things, Indian culture and integral yoga. How integral yoga is the foundation on which new India can be reborn. So we do a monthly theme, but they are part of yearly series. So this year we have taken up the series, All Life is Yoga. Last year we had from Mother Symbol, the 12 petals, the 12 qualities or 12 soul values. So we are now working on a new theme for the April issue that will be released on April 21st. And then we plan ahead for a couple of months ahead. So I invite everyone, to whoever wants to write, to be a part of journal as well. It's free online subscription. I'll put it in the chat windows at some point, so you can subscribe there. And through this journal, we also, as part of our journal related activities, we organize various events, seminars, workshops, lectures, online, offline, both ways. So everybody's welcome to join. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to this Indian art. So I have my PowerPoint also, and I'll refer to that at some point. But I thought I can also put on the screen the actual. Okay, Satyaji, can you enable the screen sharing for me, please? I
Yes.
would like to show the chapter and highlight sections, because in short period of time, I don't think we can read through the whole thing, but
You can do.
yeah. So where would that be? This is, okay. So I think this should be visible. So this is Indian Art 1. So one thing I would, those some of you may already know this, for some of you it may be new information. All these essays that Sri Aurobindo wrote were written in response to a very strong criticism of Indian culture by a journalist kind of a person, because he was a dramatic critic. He was a theater critic, but Sri Aurobindo called him, like, having the intelligence of not even like a low-level journalist, because his understanding of Indian culture, the basis on which India for the last 3,000, 5,000 years has developed such a rich culture, was absolutely nil. So his name was William Archer. So many of Sri Aurobindo's comments are written as if in response to that. So we have to kind of dig out the essence. So that's what I want to do. And Sri Aurobindo at later point said that he would have liked to revise these chapters, revise several essays from this book, which he never got to do. So the first point that I would like to highlight for us is this one. This aesthetic side of a people's culture is of the highest importance and demands almost as much scrutiny and carefulness of appreciation as the philosophy, religion, and central formative ideas, which have been the foundation of Indian life, and of which much of the art and literature is a conscious expression in significant aesthetic forms. I don't remember for sure, but I think I may have mentioned very quickly last time that in Sri Aurobindo's definition of culture, there is like soul, mind, and body. So the soul is this, the philosophy, religion, and the central formative ideas. And the mind is all the arts, the aesthetics, the sciences, the literature that a culture produces, that a people create. So this aesthetic side, Sri Aurobindo says, is as much of importance to for us to understand, to appreciate, as we focus in on Indian philosophy, Indian religion, and the core Indian spiritual ideas. Because in the case, especially in the case of Indian culture, and that is true of all ancient cultures also, that it's those central formative ideas which are consciously expressed through arts and literature of people. So this is one why Sri Aurobindo would spend so much time refuting William Archer's criticism on Indian art, is because of this, why it is so important. And then later on, he says that what we need is a general and a searching consideration of first principles in any complete view of the essential motives of Indian culture. And this is where I think it becomes really important for us, why we are here. And then he says, I am appealing mainly to that new mind of India, which, long misled by an alien education, view, and influence, is returning to a sound and true idea of its past and future. But in this field, the return is far from being as pervading, complete, or luminous as it should be. So this is the why of our project. Why is it that we are concerned about understanding the basis, spiritual basis of Indian art? Because of our alien education. Most of us are born, all of us probably in this group are born in independent India. And yet our education has been very colonized. Our minds have been colonized by the colonial view of our culture, our art, our aesthetic tradition. So, but at the same time, through for the last few decades, as we as a culture, we as a people have become more conscious of the need to decolonize our minds. We are trying to get to that true understanding of our past and what it means for a future. That is why Sri Aurobindo was writing also with that view in mind. So, decolonizing term in scholarly literature may have become popular now, but Sri Aurobindo was very conscious of his mission to help decolonize the Indian mind through his writings on Indian culture. So this is another point I wanted to bring up. But he said in the field of art and aesthetics, the return is far from being as pervading, complete, or luminous as it should be. So somehow arts have been left behind. Also remembering these writings were in around 1919, 1920, something like that. So I have marked notes in my book. So I'm just going to go a little quickly here. Okay, so now he continues with his criticism of William Archer. Those of you who may have read it, you can also just stop me and ask for explanation. Now here he gives one example of how important it is to have a good understanding of the first principles to understand Indian art. So he says, I'll give first an instance, amazing in its inaptitude. Amazing in the sense of William Archer's amazing misunderstanding of this. The Indian ideal figure of the masculine body insists on two features among many. This, if we know this, it also helps us to understand or appreciate Indian painting, Indian sculpture. What are the two key features? A characteristic width at the shoulders and slenderness in the middle. All beautiful depictions of Ishvara, Vishnu, Hari, Narayana, Ram, Krishna, you'll see this slenderness in the middle, width at the shoulders. Well, an objection to the broadness of girth and largeness of belly, allowed only where they are appropriate, as in sculptures of Ganeshas or Yakshas, is not peculiar to the Indian aesthetic sense. An emphasis, even a pronounced emphasis on their opposites, is surely intelligible enough as an aesthetic tradition. However, some may prefer a more realistic and prosperous presentation of the human figure. So what Sri Aurobindo is trying to tell us is the ideal figure of the masculine body. Later on, he gives example of the ideal feminine, not necessarily the body, the ideal feminine characteristics like the eyes, how Valmiki has described Sita's eyes, or how Kamban has described Sita's eyes and Valmiki's description of his heroine's eyes later on in the same paragraph. So he's reminding us that the Indian aesthetic has been to present an ideal figure, not necessarily the realistic presentation. And then he says Indian poets and authorities on art have given in this connection the simile of the lion. Lion, broad in the shoulder, slender in the waist, slender in the middle. The ideal man, the ideal masculine body also by Indian artists, painters, and sculptors have taken that same idea from the lion. But what Mr. Archer does, Sri Aurobindo says in a humorous way, is that this is a plain proof that Indian people were only just out of the semi-savage state. And then he says, they may be worshipping the wild beast, hence their understanding of masculine body or the connection with lion is a representation of their worship of wild beast, theriolatry. Similarly, he says then, because Valmiki describes his heroines, his Sita's eyes like wine, it's like, this gentleman Archer would say that Indians were always in some state of intoxication. So they were always thinking of wine. So what Sri Aurobindo, through an interesting sense of humor, is also describing that we shouldn't be biased or prejudiced in our understanding before we develop an appreciation of a cross-cultural view of art. But then he says, this is also, what can we say about professed critic who ignores the deeper motives and fastens on details in order to give them this kind of significance. So even though this is so important, how a masculine or a feminine figure is portrayed, Sri Aurobindo reminds us these are still details. We have to go to the first principles, the deeper motives, if we have to understand any art. And then he goes on to those first principles. Yeah, this is another very interesting point I want to point out. And I have some pictures to show about this at this point. Yeah, so this kind of nonsensical understanding, he said, can be pardoned in the average man who, under the high dispensation of modern culture, is not expected to have any intelligent conception about art. This is the state most modern education has brought us in. We do not have an intelligent conception about art. We are more into the entertainment, art as entertainment, or art as a side cake to make us look cultured. This is also where another place Sri Aurobindo says this is the a sorry state that modern education has brought us into, that we have forgotten how to appreciate what is truly beautiful, what is truly aesthetic. So again, a reason as to why we are doing what we are doing in this project. So because we have been under this influence of modernity, we have lost this intelligent conception of art. And this, I think I already talked about last time, where the whole basis, he says, the whole basis of Indian artistic creation, perfectly conscious and recognized in the canons. Canons mean the scriptures that have to do with Chitrakala, with the art of sculpture, the art of temple architecture, and all those things. The Shastras, it's been fully recognized in the canons, is directly spiritual and intuitive. And then I think last time also I mentioned, Sri Aurobindo refers to the work of Hevel, who has spoken about his book, E.B. Hevel, The Ideals of Indian Art, which came few years before Sri Aurobindo's essays. So Sri Aurobindo very pointedly refers to him, his work, and appreciates that. So let me just continue this. Yeah. So then he says that, even this gentleman, Archer, has read Hevel's work, and he spoke about how Hevel speaks about, the sculptures of Buddha, which speak about, which reflect the idea or symbolize the idea of intuition, the power of intuition. And then he says, somehow he has this objection that even the Newton's idea of gravity, the gravitational force in the earth, which was also a great intuition, he says that it is, let me just read. Sri Aurobindo says, he, meaning Archer fastens on Mr. Hevel's coupling of the master intuition of Buddha, which is that, silence, the permanent, with the great intuition of Newton, and objects to the parallel, because the two discoveries deal with two different orders of knowledge, one scientific and physical, the other mental or psychic, spiritual or philosophic nature. So Hevel in Ideals of Indian Art was talking about that the basis, the intuitive nature of Indian art and the value of intuition in seeking the highest knowledge is true whether you are working in a field like science or philosophy or spirituality. But Archer seemed to have objection from that because one, he says, is materialistic, scientific, physical, and the other is philosophic. And then Sri Aurobindo goes deep into explaining why it's a, nonsensical criticism and what is important. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into it, but I would definitely recommend those who are interested should read this very, very carefully, because this is pure philosophy, the pure understanding of how do we know what we know? What role does intuition play in knowing, and how that applies to the field of art? So then he continues about this. Yeah. Thus far, Mr. Archer on intuition. So let me just go quickly here and get to the more. Sorry. Thus far, Mr. Archer, this is the characteristic of his excursion. So even when he's talking about intuition as first principles in art, he's all confused. And here actually Sri Aurobindo describes something very nice about how Buddha's intuition, when he says that he would have rejected a certain Vedantic intuition, that is all nonsense, Sri Aurobindo says, because Buddha neither accepted nor rejected, but simply refused at all to speculate on the supreme cause, the Atman. He didn't say Atman is or not. He just stayed silent. So Sri Aurobindo says, whether you go through the Vedantic intuition of absolute infinity, absolute unity, or the Buddhistic notion of shunya or absolute nirvana, absolute silence, that the truth can be seen from different angles. And for an artist who wants to depict, later on he writes, this difference is immaterial. So shunya, it's the artist who is captured by that kind of intuitive way of knowing. He can go either from this way, which is a positive, the Vedantic way, or the more negative, not negative in the negative sense, but just another direction to understand what is that absolute truth or silence that is being expressed. So for an artist, it's an immaterial. Then Sri Aurobindo goes a little bit into the comparison kind of thing, Indian and Western art, which is also very important for us to understand. And then he continues with this idea also. So he takes an example of Leonardo da Vinci. So Leonardo da Vinci was not only a man of science, he was also a man of art. So he had that power of intuition. He had this intuitive basis of all his creativity, whether in science or in arts. But these were of different kind. Here we also get a little bit deeper into understanding of the source of knowledge. All knowledge is one, but the part in us which receives that inspiration, which receives that intuition, can be different. So there can be a side of intellect which can be very open to the kind of intuitions that Leonardo da Vinci was able to receive for his drawings on the flying machine, for example, or his understanding of the human anatomy. That was a certain kind of receptivity, certain kind of intuitive receptivity that he had. And his other creative intuitions in art were a different kind. So, and in art itself, Sri Aurobindo says there are different kinds of intuition. And then he goes into some examples of literature, which Kiranji would also find very interesting, where he speaks of Shakespeare, Balzac, and Ibsen. So they are coming from three different cultural backgrounds, all poets or literary people of life, but they were all of different time, not just time period, but also different ways of looking at Shakespeare. Sri Aurobindo held very high, like his mastery on presenting the deepest truths of human emotions on the life plane. That he held very high. So Shakespeare's seeing of life, Sri Aurobindo says, differs in its character and aims from Balzac's, which is who was a French writer, French novelist, and Ibsen's. But the essential part of the process, that which makes it intuitive, is the same. The Buddhistic, the Vedantic seeing of things may be equally powerful starting points for artistic creation. And look, listen to this, so beautiful. May lead one to the calm of a Buddha. That is the Buddhistic intuition, way of seeing things. Or the other, that is the Vedantic, the one who is captured by the infinity, to the raptured dance or majestic stillness of Shiva. And it is quite indifferent to the purposes of art, to which of them the metaphysician may be inclined to give a logical preference. It is the philosopher, the metaphysician, who is interested in the difference between the Buddhistic or the Vedantic ways of seeing of things. For an artist, they are both equally powerful starting points. So this is the wide understanding of spirituality as basis of Indian art that we get. And I have not even covered like the first 3 pages of this chapter, or 4 pages. So with this, these Sri Aurobindo says are elementary notions. And it is not surprising that one who ignores them should misunderstand the strong and subtle artistic creations of India. So whether you go through the Buddhist Ajanta caves, rock-cut caves, or you go to the grand Cholas or Pallava temples of Tamil Nadu, you are either seeing the calm of a Buddha, painting after painting, mural after mural in Ajanta, or sculpture after sculpture in Ajanta, or you are experiencing the rapture dance or majestic stillness of Shiva. To what extent you can experience this or that depends on how you have trained. So the later part of the chapter is about that cultural training, the aesthetic training that we must cultivate in us if we want to be truly appreciative of this great heritage that we are part of, artistic heritage, and if we want to be in some ways instruments of not only preserving it, but taking it to the next future. What it means for our work as artists, as art connoisseurs, as art scholars, as students of India, as lovers of Indian culture. So I'm going to take a pause here and invite reflections and comments before going further, because I don't want to make it too lectury. Next, in the next part, I'm going to show some pictures of the Gandhara art that Sri Aurobindo speaks of next. So let me stop this share and see if there are any comments, questions, reflections, thoughts, clarifications. Some point I may not have expanded or you needed. And those of you who have been reading it, please, feel free to share any thoughts or reflections. Because this should really not be like a lecture classroom. It should be more of a participatory study.
Yeah, I think, Beluji, because let us give time, but I really appreciate the way you are, bringing text as well as your interpretation. When he talks about the narration of women, in response of Archer,
Yeah.
I think that in that context, it gives me idea that, if you read any of the scripture of, of narration of any goddess or god, they simply, narrate the beauty of the god. If you read Lalita Sahasranam, it is nothing else but the beauty, So I think that is a beautiful book or granth, if you just take it like granth, of studying aesthetic sense, maybe, or any of the, for example, if you read Hanuman Chalisa also, I feel that quality, values, and beauty. So I think what William did is a very strange thing for me. And I think I'm so happy that, that time Sri Aurobindo thought of, responding to this kind of interpretation. That is like, is needed. Sometimes because of that colonial mindset, education, even we are still gripped into that. People are still not paying attention on this, which is very important, that we are not just talking about, we are not just, doing puja to the goddess, but when we are reciting the prayer, it is nothing else but the value, and, each word, each line beautifully rhymed, but it talks about beauty, the grandeur, the power, the value, which, needs to be there in human. And that is the right kind of ideal for human, being.
Yes.
Even like Lalita Sahasranama is, if you just, go a little deeper, it is talking about consciousness in a materially, in a matter form. So it's something amazing if you go through the scripture of, of these prayers. I see art in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on the surface, they may just feel like, 1,000 names of the goddess, but each name carries that depth of symbolism, that depth of consciousness. Reciting each of those names has a different effect, different impact on the consciousness. Hence the 1,000 names. Hari means something else. I mean, let's say, Vishnu Sahasranam. Why is it part of Mahabharata? It is part of literature. I mean, it is because Hari means something else, Narayan means something else, Vishnu means something else, all those things. It's so, this is where I like, how blessed are we to be born in this, with this heritage, and we just never, our education has not helped us appreciate this. So, and that's what the sad truth is, but things are changing, which is good.
Yeah, it is good. But, I can see here, if it is comfortable, Ashima, she is a professor in design school, and we have Juhika. She is a renowned artist also. So if they want to, have some comments, they can participate. If you feel comfortable, I'm happy that, I can see you here in this discourse. I'm thankful. Although I'm thankful to all that who are, taking out this odd time of your life and participating. So please share your views, because I know that both of you have, tremendous understanding what we are discussing here. Right, over to you, Beluji. Anything which you would like to continue?
Okay.
Can I just add one thing?
Please.
Oh, yes, Narendraji, please go ahead.
Yeah. So just like you mentioned the Lalita Sahasranam, and Beluji was talking about the typical description of eyes and also the masculine beauty, with the shoulders and slender in the West. If you look at Ram Raksha, it's another beautiful and almost household chanting done of Ram Raksha. In that stotra, every part of Sri Rama's body is described. So, Karo Sita Patipatu Rudayam Jamadagvanjit Madhyam Patu Karadvansi Nabhim Jamba Vadashreya Sugrivesha Katipatu Saktini. I mean, right from his shoulders to the fingers to the heart, and everything is described from head to the toes. But beauty is every time a different person related with Sri Rama is mentioned there. So where Sugriva will be mentioned, where Jambuvanta will be mentioned, where Sita will come, that all shows how they were connected with Sri Ram. So that description of his body is something after. I mean, I think we need to go into that to really understand why those names are mentioned with that particular body part, and what is the simile given to describe his name. Names are also changing. So I think it much more than what it looks at the first glance, maybe much is there to actually understand the physical aspects of the beauty, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if I can pitch in a very lighter note, in West, there is always a debate that what is aesthetic, what is beauty. So normally they talk about symmetry and, balance, and that is the way normally defined. I'm not saying that it is right or wrong, but the very I read somewhere where very subtly Indian narration in one of the book I read where Sita and Ram, they are in Vanvas, they are traveling, and that Vanar Sena, they saw that this Ram and Sita, they are coming, and Sita is beautiful. That is the narration, according to the poet's line. So somebody asked the leader of that Lady Vanar that, how do you see, she's so beautiful. Then she told that she is certainly beautiful, but she could have one small little tail, then she could have been more beautiful. So the definition of beauty may, differ. The way you are seeing the things, proportion or symmetry or something, it does not matter. It is like the beauty from, from beholder's eyes is very important also. So that is what, that in that narration I found. Our Hanuman is very different. Our Devta, all gods are, look-wise very different, not like, ideal Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, very different. Shiva, but all of them, when we see them, we never see Ganesh. We never feel that there is no symmetry, and we always feel connected. They are so beautiful, and they are so, that with ojas. So the beauty in India, or Indianness, the way Indian sees in beauty is quite different. It is connected with nature. It is connected with the soul. Even if there is no rupa, it is okay, but there is always a beauty here around us. So I really appreciate that way of looking at the beauty. Please.
Absolutely. This is so powerful, so enriching. Everything that you just said, Kiranji and Narendraji, what you said, because these are what you have just shared are examples of some of the key points Sri Aurobindo makes later on in these essays. So as you were saying, Kiranji, the roop, the form is beautiful only when it is the right expression of the spirit. Sri Aurobindo says that is the Indian view of aesthetic or artistic creation. Form has meaning only when it is an expression, true expression of the spirit. So if the Hanuman spirit is of that restless life force, the truth, which is the truth of the life plane, which is surrendered, which is mighty, and yet fully surrendered to the divine, to the supreme, that can only be represented in this form of Hanuman, who is big, mighty, with a tail, with an ape-like face, and yet the face somehow captures that complete bhakti. And this is so amazing that tomorrow is Hanuman Jayanti. So we are just taking that example, and what Narendraji was also saying about Ram Raksha. Yes, it is. And the other thing is like what you both were saying. What I also remembered were two other things from Sri Aurobindo. One is the need for, Kiranji, what you just said, the need for cultural training, the connection that we feel towards our culture consciously or subconsciously. We may not be consciously aware of the deeper symbolism all the time of everything, and yet there is something within that feels, that connects with the truth, which is hidden in the form, and all the form becomes an object of worship, right? Automatically we bow down. So that is that cultural training that comes, the samskaras, the upbringing, which is part of it. And another point was also that, there is beautiful description of body, as Narendra was saying, and yet it is not for the sensual or the materialistic ananda or delight of the human body. It is human body as a house of the soul of Rama, all of the being of Rama, various personalities that are that are embodied in this one name Ram. All those, so when you are reciting all those names or imagining all those parts of the body, you are not seeing them only as outer parts of the body, but what they represent, what they symbolize. So these are again certain things that are unique to the Indian aesthetic sensibility. If they have been lost, we need to revive them. There was one comment.
Yeah.
Rishabh.
If Rishabh can come on screen, we would really appreciate. Otherwise,
is there.
Are you there, Rishabh? Otherwise, Beluji, you read it.
Okay, I read this somewhere recently and find it very apt to the Indian conception of art and aesthetics. Aesthetic or the experience of art and beauty is a primary bridge, or to use the Platonic image, stairway or ladder between the material and the spiritual. Absolutely correct. And there is a passage of sriaurobindo also where he says, this is why aesthetic development is so important in Sri-Aurobindo's vision of education, because it makes the being subtle enough to receive the subtler truths that spirituality or the spiritual quest will bring. So it prepares, it's a very important preparatory stage, very, very important. And which is why our ancestors knew about this need for aesthetic satisfaction of the being, which is of the higher vital. So there is a vital part in us, which is life plane, where all the emotions, the desires, the passions of, all kinds of things reside, or that is the, part which expresses itself through passions, emotions, desires in higher. So the higher part of that vital is where the aesthetic development is important, because that is the source of all creativity. That is the source of all appreciation of beauty that we develop. And it is for the development of that part that when in a certain stage of Indian spiritual history, when the Tantra Puranic Upasana models, which we today understand as, primarily as the temple worship, the mainstream understanding of, Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma, or even Buddhist or Jain traditions, that temple worship became popular. How important it was to develop, to satisfy that higher vital need of aesthetic satisfaction. Hence, so much emphasis on beautiful rituals, adorning the gods and goddesses with beautiful garments, with, all kinds of flowers and dhoop and incense. So all senses are, beginning to feel that delight, beginning to feel that beauty. Because when that part is satisfied, there is an opening for the subtler truths. So one is prepared to go beyond that. So this is why there was so much emphasis given. We were not like, our spirituality was not about going to some cave or sitting in the Himalayas. That was one part of it, but not the entire. For majority of people, it was to go through the different needs, different stages of life to come to that, to be one when the being is ready for taking the next leap. So thank you. I really appreciate all the comments.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes. Who is this? Oh, Juvika.
Juvika. So I would just want to kind of just add to whatever you said regarding how Sri Aurobindo is saying that the aesthetic is all about also idolizing the figures, Indian in Indian aesthetics. Um, and the reflection of that, which we can see in the miniature paintings, especially when you say the Jain manuscripts of Chaur Panchashika, as well as when you see and refer to Gemini Roy's painting, where how the eyes are, exaggerated, and the torso of the body is so slim, and then how the figures and the physique has been depicted to an extent that it becomes so simple, at the same time becomes a symbolic representation of pure aesthetics. So I think if even if we go back to Ajanta Ellora, how Padmapani has been portrayed, whatever, when you were actually describing and reading out what Sri Aurobindo says, I could just imagine Padmapani in front of me, where it's like he's actually describing the features of Padmapani. Or even if I go back to the early civilization, where to Indus Valley civilization, where the mother goddess sculpture has been found, where the breast has been exaggerated, which is a pure form of feeding. So it's like, the mother. So it's a deity. So how the symbolic representation has a direct meaning to the aesthetics, rather than going or I don't know how to say it, but how it has been portrayed in Indian paintings, I think it is very much visible when we talk about contemporary art. Also, how the symbolic representation of say animals has been taken to some extent. If when I say Frida Kahlo, how the symbolic representation of monkey has been, has been taken, the animals has been taken from. So sometimes I feel whether it is why she took it monkey, whether is it because the monkey was her pet, or is it because she must have read Ramayana, so how it's interesting to kind of keep interpreting why monkey. So yeah, so I think we can go on having our own interpretations through reading Sri Aurobindo and looking at the history of art, the visuals that has been in front of us. I a couple of days back, ma'am, I was looking into the caricatures and drawings by Abanindranath Tagore, and how it is completely contrast images. When you see, they are not very beautiful, but at the same time they are amazingly beautiful, so it's a complete contrast representation of what human figures look like, but a total exaggeration of the authorities, the authoritative, how the figures has been completely exaggerated, who has a more authoritative power than somebody who has to work under somebody, how the figures has been portrayed smaller. So I think it's very interesting to keep referring to and going back and forth to the timeline and see and read aesthetic and interpretations. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Juhika ji, for sharing this insight. Yeah, I mean, so this is another very important point that you bring up. Just the very last thing that you ended with. We have been talking about the greatest of the Indian art. Through the, you started off with Padmapani and ended with caricatures. So that whole range is very important to keep in mind, because yes, so there is the greatest of Padmapanis and all the murals in Ajanta, And there is also the art that is done, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about it. Not all Indian art was of this hieratic or, about the expressing the highest truths. There was art done even in the moments of jest, like the caricature. So this is not something new that, okay, Abanindranath Tagore is not recent, and yet Abanindranath Tagore was a very key figure in the tradition, in the Indian painting history, in the history of Indian painting, because he was a key figure in the renewal, the rebirth of bringing the Indian soul back into the painting, which had before him, before the Bengal school, was more imitative of the Western European realism schools. So Abanindranath Tagore and all those in the Bengal school were trying to bring the spirit of Ajanta painting, and yet having been trained into the academic realism and the Western concepts of aesthetics and painting traditions. So what new forms they gave to. So for him to bring back that old tradition of caricatures, expressing art in a lighter mood, because intuition is the basis, but intuition is there at every level, even at the plane of life. The vital plane has its own capacity to receive inspiration, to receive intuition. So caricatures or things that that express through that plane is also carrying a truth behind. So this diversity, this range has to be also kept in mind. Not every Indian artist will paint a Padmapani, but they may express the truth of life through other expressions, through other forms. So spirit is important, form is secondary. So I really appreciate what you shared, Juhika. Really very important to keep in mind.
I totally agree with you, ma'am. Whatever you said, it's very interesting to kind of, again, going back and forth, coming and then reflecting how, also Rabindranath, Abanindranath, Gaganendranath, all of these were the major figures to kind of, again, rejecting what Raja Ravi Verma did. So also at the same time questioning, is the oil color an Indian material? I think it's all very interesting, and at the same time coming to the contemporary area, and then again going back and forth to the old civilizations, taking reference from the rock cut architectures or rock cut paintings, where what kind of documentation. So where is it coming today when we are talking about documenting? Where is it coming? The references when we talk about aesthetics, or when we talk about symbolism, when we talk about intuition, where is it coming from? It is all there. Yes. But then I think it is very interesting to keep referring to the timelines, and also at the same time, not just Indian, it is also very interesting to keep referring to West. So recent times when I was this exercise, I started working with students to not just read Western aesthetics or Western art or Indian aesthetics and Indian art, but what if we start reading them together? So what the timeline, like when Ajanta was happening here, what was happening there? So what is the timeline? So I think that will make us more stronger, and to understand that we do praise a lot of Western art, only because it has a better documentation, but we start looking into Indian. We did a lot much before. So and how we kept challenging. So they started challenging after Picasso came in, but we started challenging much before, after painting Ajanta inside the cave itself.
Yes. Yes, very true, very true. Maybe next time I will show. Actually, I had downloaded few images of the paintings Sri Aurobindo refers to from the early, late Renaissance period in Venice. he specifies few key paintings. So I thought we can also look at them, but I am also looking at the time. Maybe next time we'll take it up. But I really appreciate, Juhika, your being here with us and you're sharing this. And I also want to acknowledge another comment from Ashima. There is a life form in every idol of God, goddesses we see, whether it is Sri Ram or Radharani. And I feel that life form, vital energy or their innate qualities provides immense beauty to it. Yes, absolutely. I mean, there is a very conscious act of pran pratishtha, which is what makes the murti into a deity, into a god or goddess. So that pran pratishtha is a elaborate ritual. Without that, this is just a sculpture, not a vigraha to which we will bow down. So yes. So
yeah, I think here I'll like to have one. I was translating book of Ghulam Mohammad Sheikh, who is renowned artist in Gujarat, and the book he has written is Nirkhete Najar, and where he was describing Patta Chitra. So in Adivasi or in certain area, they used to draw and then they used to narrate the story in the evening in the villages. So while drawing on patta, that is cloth, they sit on the cloth and they draw. It is a long patta. It is a patta katha they narrate afterwards. So when they reach to the eyes of that katha, because katha is about goddesses and their life. So when they reach to the eyes, there is a phrase called mani mukyo. Means mani is a there is a chamak, it is a kind of diamond. So when they put that that what you say retina kind of thing in the eyes while drawing, that time they stop putting the legs on that cloth. It means now it is alive. Yeah. So imagine that what one can say about that artists who are just novice, they are not so-called well educated, but they know exactly what is spirituality. And yes, while drawing, they are just drawing, and then suddenly it becomes live. So Pran Pratishtha is like that. Okay, it is a simple art, but once you reach to certain point.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the god is now residing. The goddess is now residing there. And I mean, just listening to this, I feel a certain sensation in me, and that I think is the amazing vibration when we come together and consciously bring to our mind, our mental sphere, the gems from our tradition. And it really helps us develop a very sensitive appreciation of the truths of who we are as a collective and the responsibility that it brings to us to take it to the next, as educators, as writers, scholars. So I think it's now 8 o'clock, and maybe others may also have some insights, but maybe if they can. I wanted to ask Kiranji, can everybody now post in the WhatsApp group?
Yes, they can post it. And before we go there, let me thanks to the participants today who directly participated. Thank you, Juhika, for bringing out this your point of view, which enriched our discussion today. And I look forward for this kind of participation in future also with all. I request all participants. We don't know your area actually, but once you will be participating, it will enrich much more. So I'm thankful that all of you are, involved in this discourses. Yes, I think they can WhatsApp us. They can write us. One-way communication is always good. That is why we created WhatsApp. If you need anything, thank you, Dinesh. If you need any support or any question, if you have, you can always WhatsApp or you can mail also. Okay. And phone number is already in WhatsApp, so nothing to worry about it. We all of us are available there. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So shall we stop here for now, and we'll continue in our discussion next week. with maybe few pictures as examples of the Indian and Western art. We'll pick it up.
After your session, Narendra ji will be, bringing up.
Okay. Okay.
Once you finish your sessions, I'll request
Okay.
Narendra ji to pitch.
So maybe you and I can touch base briefly tomorrow or day after, depending on our schedules. So we'll go from there.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So
Yeah,
let's just,
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Narendra ji.
okay. So we'll close here.